Very small things are usually acceptable, but like nothing big.
Hmm.
Like you can have like a bottle of water. I don't think they'll care.
Yeah, yeah.
But for whatever reason, this like group of people got on the train with like an entire dinner wrapped up in like aluminum
Oh my
foil.
God.
And they just unwrapped it and like started having like an actual sit down meal,
Jeez.
like in the corner of the train.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Welcome to the show. So I am Tony and I'm joined by...
I'm Ryan.
All right. So we're back. And as always, we're picking a question to ask about Japan and trying to learn more about Japan through the process of answering it. So today's question is, why do Japanese train stations do that?
Because of course they do that. Duh. Question over.
Question over, exactly. So let me explain what exactly this means. So there's a lot of things going on in Japanese train stations, really interesting things that perhaps you don't realize at first, or when you do, sometimes you're kind of puzzled, like, why do they do it that way? And as I was looking into this, I found this interesting article published on City Lab, and it's called, I believe, like The Amazing Psychology of Japanese Train Stations. And it points out a bunch of interesting things, some of which I thought could be delved into a little bit more deeply. One particular one, which I thought was a little bit misleading. And so we're just going to go through a bunch of things that happen in Japanese train stations that are interesting in some way or another. So before we get to that, though, I thought it's interesting to point out that, of course, Japan has perhaps like the most famous train system in the world, right? And it's like one of the busiest, if not the busiest, especially in Tokyo.
I think that's true.
Yeah. Millions upon millions use it, on a daily basis. And I think one statistic put it at like 15 billion or something trips every year. So, there's a lot of people using trains, especially in the big cities.
Definitely.
Yeah. And of course, when you travel through a station like Shinjuku or, basically any of the major train stations in Tokyo, particularly, there's a whole lot of people and it's can be kind of overwhelming if it's your first time in that situation.
The stations themselves can just be massive and completely flooded with people.
Yeah, like labyrinths sometimes, like just, underground, second level,
They'll
third
have
level,
like
fourth
up to
level.
6 basements.
Yeah. Again, especially in Tokyo, but even in like, Osaka or, some of the other big cities, they do have some pretty impressive train stations too. And trying to figure that out the first time that you're there, especially if you're not familiar with the language, can be tricky, but eventually, everybody just kind of finds their way, figures it out. It's not as difficult as it looks the first time you get in there. But
before we get into the questions,
yeah.
I'm kind of curious. What was your experience with trains before you went to Japan?
So I the first place that I went to in Japan, well, okay, the first time I went to Japan, I first went to Kagoshima.
Okay.
And in Kagoshima, we were staying at my friend's host family's place, and they lived like, I can't remember exactly how far away it was. It was like maybe 30-minute walk from the nearest train station.
Yeah, slight interjection in case the audience doesn't know. Kagoshima, very far from Tokyo.
True. Yes, Kagoshima is at the southern tip of the southern island of Japan.
Yeah, not what you would think of for major train stations in very busy place, but not a tiny place, I think.
Yeah, that's like, I guess, considered mainland Japan, quote unquote. Any further down and you get into like the Ryukyu Islands, which is like Okinawa and other little islands along the way. But so Kagoshima is not like big city. There is Kagoshima City, which is city-ish, but compared to, Osaka or Tokyo, it's still pretty small. So, we only like rode one train like into town, and then we would ride it into town and then ride it back. So it was nothing like, Tokyo.
It's like my life now.
Where are you again, Ryan? You should tell people.
So now I'm in Ishikawa Prefecture, which is in kind of central northern Japan. It's it's on the south part of a peninsula that juts into the Sea of Japan.
Yeah.
We do have a major city, I'm doing air quotes, called Kanazawa.
Yeah.
I don't live there. I live about 45 minutes outside of there. And if I want to go there, it's the one train line, only the local. Takes about 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it's a tiny train. I've seen it be down to only like 3 cars. It's usually like really full if it's that small though.
Yeah. The same in Kagoshima. It was usually a fairly small train, and it was a Wanmanressha. So
that's what mine is.
Yeah. So that word, like, I wasn't fluent in Japanese at all when I went in 2006, but that word really stood out to me. And one man literally is like one man. Ressha is a word for train. So it's a one-man train, which sounds strange, but basically in more rural areas of Japan, there are these small trains that are basically operated by just the driver. There isn't another person like checking tickets. Oftentimes there aren't even people at the smaller train stations. It might be just an empty train station that you leave your ticket in like a basket when you leave the turnstiles, right?
The closest station to where I work now is like that. There's no ticket gates or anything.
It's just open. You can walk in, walk out. Yeah.
You have to buy a ticket from the machine because if you get off at a different station, their machine will check it.
Yeah.
But if you get off at the tiny station, there's just like a little trash can.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to many of those. And those are always kind of like charming. Like, it's like, oh my God, people actually like follow the rules. Like, wow.
Yeah. They actually like started expanding it. So now it has like a bike parking lot and it looks kind of new and fancy outside.
Yeah.
And then you go inside and it's just absolutely nothing. It's like 2 benches next to some tracks.
So anyway, at the end of that Kagoshima trip, I did end up going to Tokyo. And then the second time that I went to Japan, I was in Osaka. So, at that point I was like, oh wow, okay, so this is like, typical Japan train system. I love Japanese trains. I love the train system, how convenient it is, how, all the little things that we're going to talk about today, the melodies and all that kind of stuff. I always found it just really enjoyable. So
it's interesting to hear your answer though, because I think my experience is almost exactly the opposite. So before coming to Japan, I had never ridden a train.
Yeah.
And the very first place I went in Japan was Tokyo for like a 3-week sort of homestay. We didn't really have a host family or anything. We just sort of like rented an apartment for a month. But it was like downtown Tokyo.
Yeah.
Using like Ikebukuro, Shinjuku, Shibuya stations all the time.
Yeah, those are crazy stations, yeah.
So that was like my very first train station was one of those huge ones.
Yeah.
And then a year later, I moved to live in Osaka, where I was at for 4 years, which not as big as Tokyo, but almost the same.
Yeah.
And then after that, now living where I am now, where it's the countryside.
True, yeah.
All the trains. It was a little bit of culture shock here, because in Osaka, I never checked timetables, because you just show up and the train will come within the next 3 minutes.
Yep.
But now they come like once every 45 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
The first couple of months, I'd have a bad habit of just like showing up and be like, oh, the next train doesn't come for 30 more minutes. I guess I just sit here now.
Yeah, same in Kagoshima. We had to wait quite a while sometimes. Yeah. So, train stations are fun. And they've got all kinds of stuff that we're going to get into. So let's get into the first one, which is...
Why do Japanese train stations use cute songs to indicate a train is about to leave?
Right. So...
Known as Hasshamero.
Hasshamero, right?
That's a melody. Typo on the paper.
Typo on my notes, yeah.
Sorry. It's like erodi. That sounds like that would mean something else.
Yeah, erodi sounds like something very different. Sometimes they'll shorten it to Hasshamero or Hasshamerodi. I've also seen it as a Eki melody. But basically, if you've ever been to a Japanese train station, on the platform, as the train is preparing to leave, you'll hear some like cute little song. It sounds like it almost sounds like a MIDI oftentimes, right? Like an old-fashioned
like
MIDI. Yeah, like little beeping and bells, and it's very like
old if the audience doesn't know what a MIDI is.
Yeah, MIDI. Yeah, like I'm not going to get into that, but I will insert some kind of Hasshamero here. There we go. So they all have, something really interesting about these melodies, I think, is they give a real sense of personality to a train station, right? So like if your train station has a particularly distinct melody, like the next time you hear that, you're thinking, oh, I live there. Like you kind of have these like nostalgic feelings, maybe this connection to that melody. And sometimes they'll like adapt popular, songs. Like for example, the melody for the Mogi, was it Mogizaka? I think is the name of the station in the Chiyoda subway line in Tokyo, and that uses an adapted version of Mogisaka's 46. They have a song and they adapted that. So
it's just that station, not even the whole line?
No, it's just that station uses an adapted version of that idol group song because they're associated with that area of Tokyo. First of all, let me apologize to all you Nogizaka 46 fans out there. I know I was saying Mogizaka with an M, but it's with an N, Nogizaka. The place Nogizaka is actually named after General Nogi Maresuke, but that's a whole other story, which we will get into in a future episode, so stay tuned for that. As for the title of the song that I'm referring to, that song is called Kimi no na wa Kibō, which literally translates to Your Name is Hope. And during my most recent trip to Tokyo, I happened to stop by that station on the Chiyoda line, the Nogizaka station, and I did get a chance to record the departure melody, so here it is. So some train lines just have, all the same melody, but oftentimes, especially in like bigger train lines, like on the Yamanote line in Tokyo, different train stations have different melodies. But the reason for these melodies is an interesting one, and there's a certain like psychology to this choice, right? Like apparently, train stations used to use like kind of alarm clock like buzzers to indicate that a train is about to depart, but they decided to start using these melodies to give it kind of like a less stressful kind of feel, right? And that ends up hopefully causing less people to like rush at the train and do that whole kakegomi josha kind of thing where it's like trying to run in at the last minute.
And it seems that was effective. Unfortunately for us, they made the transition before either of us had ever been to Japan. It seems like it happened in 1989.
Yeah,
so I have no experience with whatever the old sound used to be, but
yeah, I think I may have heard it in like movies or something like that. I can't remember distinctly though. But from what I read in I think it was the Japanese Wikipedia article on the topic, they described it as like an alarm clock, like buzzer.
It doesn't sound like that would be very soothing.
No, it doesn't seem pleasant. Like every once in a while, some trains, like the bullet train, still uses this kind of digital alarm clock, like almost like a phone ringing type sound.
Yeah.
When it's arriving, and that's not particularly pleasant either. But
it's
I guess
not as bad as an alarm clock, but I think a phone ringing is a good way to.
Yeah, and that's for when this train is arriving. I guess it's like an extra safety precautions. It's like, this is something you should be aware of. Don't get near the track.
That train is famous for being very quiet. So
yes.
Maybe they wanted to have a louder one just so people would stay away from the tracks. Not like
absolutely
people go on the tracks when it's not there though. But
yeah. My friend was on the bullet train one time. He was visiting me. And it was so quiet that he missed his stop. So he had to get off at the next one and take the regular train back to Kobe, where I was.
When you miss your stop on a bullet train, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I think he ended up, he was supposed to get off at Kobe. He ended up in like Himeji or around there. So that is like I don't know, more than an hour train ride. Yeah. It was, not the worst, but still, you don't want to miss
there can be like a full hour of travel between stops. So it's not that bad, but still, that's pretty far.
Yeah. So from what I read, apparently it's the whole train melodies, departure melodies started popping up in the 70s, maybe, but it wasn't until 1989 where like East Japan Railways really popularized it. And then it's just become a super common thing and a really fun thing, right? Like when you get off at the train station, you never know what you're going to hear. And like, it's always fun. Like, oh, I know that song, or like, I've heard this song, or like you hear it and you go, I know this song, but I can't remember what it is. And then you have to like kind of rack your brain for a while to figure it out. But yeah,
so I'm almost afraid to say this after hearing your great explanation. Apparently, I'm a bad passenger because I have never paid attention to the songs.
Well, some people pay attention to them more than others, and that's perfectly fine. But
remember in Osaka, one of them goes like do 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 do, but I don't know which train line that is.
Yeah, there was.
Nankai?
I never used to ride the Nankai very often.
It might be Chikatetsu.
There's one interesting thing that I think it was the loop line in Osaka. They did this. So there's this famous singer who is from Osaka, and I can't remember his name, but I will look it up later. But he sang this song where it was I can't remember if this is the title, but there's this line that goes like "Mecha Sukiyanen," right? And it's Osaka dialect. It's something like "Oh, I love you."
Osaka,
Yeah. And he passed away when I was still living there. I think it was around 2013. And the train line, maybe it was just the Umeda train station, the main train station, but they changed the melody to his song, to like kind of honor his death. So I thought that was really cool, like how they play with that every once in a while.
Like, was it permanent or just for like?
Just for a short time.
Oh, okay.
I think, yeah, they made a train departure melody version of the main part of that song that everybody in Osaka would, be able to recognize.
Okay, so I got the title wrong. It was not Mecha Sukiyanen. It's actually Yappa Sukiyanen. I'm going to include a YouTube video in the show notes at japankyo.com/ichimon, so you can go listen to the real song, not me butchering it. And if you're curious, the singer was known as Takajin. Now that's a stage name, but everybody knew him as Takajin. So you can go check it out again at japankyo.com/ichimon.
Small thing I'm going to point out. I can also immediately tell you did in fact live there because you called it Umeda and not Osaka Station.
Oh. Well, yeah, because Umeda, I think technically is the Hankyu station name.
Like the area name, but
yeah. It is the station area. Yeah, that whole area is Umeda, yeah.
But yeah, I think JR is called JR Osaka.
Yes.
But I think everyone else calls it Umeda.
Yeah.
The people call it Umeda.
Yep.
But people not from Osaka usually call it Osaka Station.
Yep. Yes. So yeah. Oh, and they're usually about 7 seconds is what I read, because that seems to be the best length.
I've never timed it. I'll assume they're right. It sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds about right too. Yeah. Okay. So what's the next area?
Okay, I guess I'll read again.
Yeah.
Why are there lines and numbers on the platform?
Okay, so this is pretty straightforward, and
this one seems kind of obvious.
Yeah, but it's something that I didn't particularly think about early on, because your instinct as a brutish American sometimes is just like, just stand by the door and you just push your way into the train, and especially when you have a lot of people waiting to get on the train, that seems like what you would have to do. But no, there's actually like especially in crowded train stations, right? There's numbers and lines and people line up. And then this line is for the express train. This line is for the local train. So if you get in the wrong line, then you mess up because you're not going to get the good seat. And something that I love about this system is that the trains are like so consistent. So
yes, they will be exactly at their mark.
Exactly right. So the second train car will always be at like number 5, for example, right?
Yeah.
And so if you figure it out, you can, let's say every morning you go to the work via the train, you know which door to get on to get off near the stairs at the train station where you get off at, right? Like,
That
figure
is no exaggeration. When I was commuting in Osaka, I had it like planned out what was the best train car to get on and off to make my trip
exactly. Yeah.
easy as possible.
And it's just so wonderful how like consistent they are. So I would do that too when I was working over there, just in Kobe. I knew exactly where to get on, where to get off, and it was super smooth.
I think I can also say, since I'm now in my 7th year in Japan, I've noticed this system I think has been expanded upon. Because when I was new to Japan, you'd see it in big stations, but sometimes the little smaller ones wouldn't have it as much.
Yeah.
And I think you're starting to see it more and more other places. Or just expanded even in the big ones. Like, so where I live now, our closest thing to a bullet train is called the Thunderbird, Sandabado.
Yeah.
And they're not always the same size. Some of them will be 10 cars, some will be 12. And there will be lines painted on the ground that says, like, if you are Thunderbird 5, this is where door 3 will be. If you're Thunderbird 4, door 3 will be, like, sometimes just, like, 2 meters to the right. But they'll actually label that also.
Yeah. Yeah, or like another thing that might be marked is if it's a women's only car, right?
Yes, they will mark. That's very good to know.
Yes. Yeah. And again, if you're just getting there and you're not aware of these things, you won't spot it. But once you figure it out, then you go, I shouldn't line up here, even though there's a bunch of people lined up, because I'm going to end up in a car that I'm going to have to move out of anyway.
Yeah. So
If you're a
in case you
guy,
don't know,
unless you're a girl, then it's fine.
rush hour morning and evening, many cars, especially in the cities, will have women-only cars.
Yes. Yeah.
Men should not go on.
Yeah. And I've accidentally got on. I mean,
when it's like about to leave, yeah, you just run on, but then you can change cars once it starts going.
yeah.
Another funny thing I like that I noticed recently when I went to Osaka a couple months ago, they have English on these two now, and the translation's a little awkward, but I kind of like it. It's like zone for getting on, zone for getting off.
That's where you get off, Ryan. So
Yeah, like they actually have it separated so that you don't stand in front of the doors and block the passengers trying to get off.
yeah. Oh, that's another thing. Yeah, like your instinct might be to just like stand where the doors open, but you do not want to do that because you're gonna end up with like a face full of like a dozen people like rushing at you.
Yeah, you stand slightly to the sides of the doors.
Yeah, on either side of the door. Yeah. All right. So, what is the next interesting thing that we had?
Next one is, why is there a high-pitched noise?
So this is something that I hadn't particularly noticed, and maybe
I'm glad you say that because me too.
Yeah, and in my defense, it's not just that I'm an old man. I was there in Japan in my early 20s as well. But
me also, and
yeah.
So there is I almost want to call it a rumor because I've never seen it, that in order to discourage like teenagers from loitering around the train stations, certain stations will play a high frequency tone that annoys them.
Yeah.
That they say is at 17 kilohertz, which
Yes.
can usually only be heard by people under 25.
Yeah.
Similar to you, I was in urban Osaka, under 25, never heard this. Since not being under 25, I've actually tested my hearing online. I can still hear the sound.
Me too. Yeah.
And I've still never heard it at a train station.
Me too. Absolutely. Yeah. I've done those online things to see if I can still hear it. And I think I should still be able to hear it. At least the last time I checked, I was supposed to. But
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's not like on permanently. Maybe
perhaps.
They just turn it on if there's like a group of kids building up.
Maybe, yeah. So, let's explain. So, yeah, like you said, 17 kilohertz. There's supposed to be this high-pitched noise that is meant to disperse like kids loitering in, like, let's say, crowded entryways or something in train stations. And this was really popular, this whole idea of like the high-pitched noise that only younger people can hear, like maybe about 10 years ago. There were like these,
which is when I was here and under 25.
Yeah. Like there were like phone, ringers, right? Ringing melodies. What do you call those? That like teens would use on their phones so that they could they could use it in school and their older teachers wouldn't notice, but they would still find out if they were being texted or called. And that was in the news like for quite a while here in the US. Lately, you don't hear about it so much, but according to the City Lab article, this still happens. One example they give is in Tokyo, but again, I've never noticed it, so maybe it's just us.
I mean, we were both in Osaka too. Maybe Osaka never adopted it.
Yeah.
Also, from my experience, teenagers generally didn't hang around train stations.
Yeah, it's usually like convenience stores, right?
Yeah, where I lived would be Konbini and like McDonald's.
Yeah, true. McDonald's too. So
my local McDonald's in Osaka actually had signs up saying like, "Don't hang out and play card games," because junior high kids would come in and play Yu-Gi-Oh there.
Interesting, huh? So I don't know. Maybe this is a thing. Maybe it's not. If anybody out there has heard this high pitched noise, please let us know. Ichimon@japankyo.com. There you go. You can send us an email. So yeah. Let's do the next one, and then we'll do a quick break after the next one.
So the next one is, why do train stations want people to only stand on escalators?
Okay, so this is a kind of controversial topic, I suppose you could say.
This one I had researched before this question even came up, just because it's interesting.
It is very interesting, it is. And it's also been kind of a futile effort, it seems, but but let's explain. Let's explain for anybody that's not aware. So, Ryan, do you remember which side is it that people stand on in Osaka and which side is it that people stand on in Tokyo?
In Osaka, you stand on the right. In Tokyo, you stand on the left.
Right. So, it's common for people to stand on one side of the escalator and then leave the other side open for people to walk up if they don't just want to stand there.
In case you're curious, I kind of live in the middle now.
Oh.
And people just sort of stand on both sides and nobody walks. Like, they don't stand as they're supposed to on both sides.
Yeah.
They still, like, take the whole step, but they'll just kind of be there.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's kind of what's supposed to happen, but...
Well, you're supposed to be 2 per step, I think.
Yeah, you are. Yes, exactly. So anyway, so that's the common thing because, some people like to walk, some people like to stand, and the people that stand don't want to get in the way of the people that want to walk, and the people that walk...
Common sense tells you that would work quickly.
Yeah, and the people that walk are sometimes impatient, and they'll get angry at people that are standing in their way, and they go like, what are you doing? And, that happens sometimes in Japan, just like it happens in other parts of the world. But there's been studies that show that aside from
mathematically proven.
Yes. Aside from it just being safer to not walk up escalators, because, they're big steps and accidents can happen, people can fall, etc. It's just more efficient for both sides to stand, for everybody that rides the escalator to stand.
Yes, if both sides stand, it'll be faster. More people can travel up quicker than if one side walks.
Yes.
I think even if then both sides walk.
Yeah. If both sides were to walk, then yeah, absolutely. That would only magnify the speed, it seems. But
I think it might actually... I don't remember if they studied that, but I think that might also be slower.
Really? If both sides walk?
I'm not...
but maybe because you need to give more space... Yeah. Right?
That's the thing. So if this sounds counterintuitive to you, the reason is if you're standing, you can be right on top of the person in front of you.
Yeah.
So there's very little space wasted. But if you're walking, you need one body of space between you and the person in front of you.
Yeah.
So even if each person is traveling faster, there's roughly half as many people using the escalator, which totals out to being slower than just having everyone stand close together.
Right. So a study in London, in the London subway system, proved this. They did it for 6 months, and it proved that it was more efficient to have everybody, in a very crowded London subway to use the subway by standing, next to each other on each step. And one video that I was watching made it very easy to understand. So in 1 minute, theoretically, 80 people can use the stairs if one side stands, one side walks, but up to 112 people can use it in a minute if both sides, stand side to side on each step. And this difference, of course, is going to grow each minute that passes.
Yeah,
so,
that's almost 50% increase.
Yeah, so what is it, 80? There's a difference of 20, 30, 32 people per minute?
32.
Yeah. Almost 50%. True, yeah. Yeah. So it's very, efficient. Now, the thing is that even London, they had trouble adopting this wide scale. And then Japan, for the past several years, they've been really trying to push this. Even now when I go back to Japan, there will be signs, in Fukuoka too. There will be signs that tell people don't walk up the escalators. And, they try to convince people by saying it's dangerous and whatever, it's more efficient. But people just keep standing off to one side and keep walking on the other side. I don't know how they're going to fix this, how they're going to do it, because it seems like a really tough thing to change.
I have 2 small comments I want to say about that. One, some part of me is glad Japanese people are resisting it because there's such an international stereotype. No, I think it would be better if they did it.
Yeah.
But there's an international stereotype of Japanese people being submissive and just going along.
Doing whatever they're told, right?
Yeah, so it's nice to be but look, they don't do this.
Yeah, not everybody does that, yeah.
And the second thing is I've always wanted to get a t-shirt that had the please don't walk up the escalator warning printed on the back, and then just stand in whatever the walking area is and see what the person behind me will do. Because I've had it happen where I'm with a friend and you kind of don't think and you end up standing there and they tap you on the shoulder, or sometimes they just start to push you out of the way.
Yeah. There are pushing Japanese people.
No, man, look, you don't walk.
Yeah, absolutely. One interesting thing that I was thinking about this as I was researching this, this works perfectly in Tokyo or super crowded rush hour kind of areas. But in a less crowded area, what might end up happening is you just get perhaps something like what you were describing, right? People stand on either side, but they're kind of spread out. So you end up not even being able to really either walk or stand in an efficient way. So that's one thing that, I don't know, you can't really combat that unless you have so many people that you just have no choice but to do it the most efficient way, right?
Well, like, in defense of the people here, there's never like a buildup of people trying to go up the escalators just because there's so much fewer people. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
it's not the most efficient way. We're still kind of okay just because there's so many less
There's
people.
just no need anyway.
Like, to be honest, the examples I'm thinking of are inside of shopping malls because we don't have big stations that even have this problem.
Yeah. And you know, a lot of shopping malls have like only one person. Like you can't line up side to side. They're just narrow.
I have seen the very narrow ones.
Yeah, yeah, that does happen a lot in those like train station malls that are connected to the train stations, right? Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe in the not too distant future there won't be any more walking, but who knows? Who knows? That's been like an uphill
they've been
battle.
trying for like a decade and it doesn't seem to be working.
Yeah, yeah. Every few years I see a news report of them trying to do it, and it just doesn't end up working. Like this past year when I was there, like with you in Tokyo, it's like, nah, it's not working.
It's also like for the wear and tear on the escalator,
Yes.
better if people are on both sides because the way it is now is like all the weight is on the standing side,
Yes.
which just causes the gears and stuff to wear out faster.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
just strictly better if they would do this, but yeah, they won't do it.
Yep.
And again, for combating stereotypes, I believe the London people did do it
Yeah.
for like month or whatever
That's
they were asked to. But
yeah, my
Japanese people
understanding.
won't.
Yeah. So we'll see. Anyway, there's a few more things that we're going to touch upon, some interesting train station stuff and why they do it that way. But let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hey, Tony here. So it's commercial time. Yay! So if you have any interesting stories related to Japanese train stations, maybe you got lost in a train station, maybe something weird happened to you in a Japanese train, then why not send it over to ichimon@japankyo.com. Just write it up and we'd love to read it on air as long as it's, appropriate. And if you really, really love Japanese train station noises, then let me tell you, I have a podcast that's perfect for you because I use a lot of train station noises, and it's called Japan Station. And on that show, I interview all kinds of people, really, really interesting people about topics related to Japan. In one of the most recent episodes, episode 31, I talked to Christopher Yomei Blaisdell. He is a master of the shakuhachi. That's a bamboo flute, if you're not aware. He's been doing it since 1972, and he is one of the leading figures in the shakuhachi world that are outside of Japan. So very cool guy, very fun conversation. So go check that out, japanstationpodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, so we are back, and you may remember that at the beginning of the episode, I mentioned that there was one specific thing in the City Lab article that I found that I thought was a bit misleading, and we did a bit of research into it to try to find out if just how true this exactly is. So anyway, Ryan, what is this?
This question is, why do Japanese train stations have blue lights?
Okay, so I have to admit, I didn't notice this. Had you ever noticed this?
This is not just general lighting.
Yeah.
This is specific panels of blue lights near the tracks, which I have also never noticed, but I will look out for them next time I go to Tokyo.
Yeah, so
Which is
apparently...
tomorrow, actually.
Oh, great. Yeah, it's supposedly all the Yamanote train stations have them. They're typically located at the furthest reaches of the extremes of the train platform.
So like the far left and the far right of the platform.
Yeah. Because and we're going to get into why they have these blue lights installed, but supposedly they are used to prevent suicides, and the extremes of these platforms are usually popular places for people that are trying to commit suicide because they're removed from the general crowds. It's easier to jump onto the train tracks from these areas, so it makes sense that they would put these blue lights in that area. Now, this claim, just to me, immediately on the face, just seemed completely unbelievable. Like, how does a blue light help prevent suicide?
Especially a light in one little corner that no one notices exists.
Yeah, absolutely. And for example, in the daytime, my general impression is that most suicides happen during the day. And I would even venture to say in the morning, during the morning rush hour and that kind of stuff. There has been at least one or two times when I was working in Japan where the train got delayed either before I was about to get on it or after I had gotten off it because of a suicide attempt or full on just somebody actually managed to kill themselves, like by jumping on the tracks. So this is something that happens, around Japan. Japan is kind of famous for the high suicide rate, and the trains jumping onto the tracks is, one common way, perhaps like the most well-known way that people do it. So obviously trying to combat this is a big thing. And for some reason, Japan and other places around the world too have latched on to this idea that blue lights are extremely successful at preventing suicide.
Yeah, the origin is some study, again I'm doing air quotes, found that there was an 84% drop in suicide rates at one train line after blue light emitting lamps were installed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'll include a link to that study, but it's dated in 2013, although I found the 2012 version, so I don't know if there was like a preliminary version and then it was published in 2013. I'm not sure, but the study takes a look at 10 years of data at this train line that installed blue lights, I think at pretty much every train station around 2008. I think it was like 71 train stations. And they compared data before and after. And I think they also included train stations at like another nearby train line that wasn't using the blue lights. Anyway, they found an 84% decrease, which...
sounds convincing.
Yeah. Well, on the surface, it sounds convincing.
No control of any kind,
Yeah. So on the surface, it sounds very convincing. But if you're at all, and I'm horrible at statistics, so I will preface this. But if you're at all like experienced in like the scientific method and have any exposure to how research is done, that seems like a completely incredible, unbelievable number. Like
that would be insane. Like you would, if this was real, finding like a 5% decrease would be. Yeah. Good news.
You go, oh, wow, like it might do something. This is worth investigating further.
Yeah.
Right? But this study like found this 84% decrease, and then news agencies like around the world like latched onto this, started translating this, and it went crazy. And even now you can still find tons of articles from that time, from 2015, from 2016, like citing that study. And there have been like other places around the world that have looked into this and have adapted this, installing blue lights. But, there have been multiple people that have spoken out on this study and studies that followed after this that, say you can't say, like, it's really misleading to say that blue light equals less suicide. Right. At best, it's misleading. There may be something there, but it's not. The theory is that for some reason, blue light is calming. But like, I couldn't find any concrete like thing of evidence, like saying like why this blue light works in this way and where this idea originated from.
Yeah, it feels like someone somewhere said like, this might work, let's try it. And that was the beginning.
Yeah. So what I was able to find is that in 2000, Glasgow in Scotland installed blue lights as street lights, and some evidence, possibly just kind of like not super scientific kind of anecdotal evidence, seemed to suggest that there was a dip in the crime rate. And then in around 2005, 2006, somewhere in Nara Prefecture adopted these kind of same street lights that would put out blue light. And then around 2008, that train line that I mentioned earlier adopted in their train station these blue light emitting lamps. And it's just kind of snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And the City Lab article that kind of, sparked this whole idea of this episode still cited that, still didn't really clear up the fact that this is at best like still not proven, right?
Yeah, so that article I think was 2019.
Yeah, it's very recent, and that's what's like
but
so shocking about it.
Another article we're probably going to bring up soon that kind of debunked it came out in 2017, I think. So this was already very much in question when the other article chose to ignore that.
Yeah. And then like just in January of this year, 2019, the BBC put out an article that revisited this topic, and they talked to one of the researchers that worked on that 2013 paper that really put this whole thing into overdrive. And one interesting thing that she mentions is that people, like countries, will still call her to follow up on this idea, because obviously 84%, that's amazing, right? They want to implement this too. But she says that one thing that she tells these individuals, these organizations, these countries is, if you're thinking about doing something about suicide, put in the train station like platform doors. Do not use the blue light, right? Even she like still encourages people to do the platform doors. Now, the platform doors are extremely expensive. They take a lot of work to put in, and you also have to oftentimes like reinforce the platforms to handle this weight of these automatic opening doors that open when the train arrives and then close after it departs.
So yeah, they're essentially like a second set of doors that go to the train.
Mm-hmm.
They're made of steel, quite large.
Yeah.
Probably like up to your chest height, I'd say.
Usually, sometimes they're even
About a
bigger,
meter or
but
so?
yeah,
Yeah, I have seen them go all the way to the ceiling,
Yeah.
now that I think of it.
yeah. And I mean, it's pretty much impossible to like go over that and jump onto the tracks.
Yeah.
So they are, I would totally believe an 84% decrease in suicide when after those are installed.
Yeah, when you put up a
Yeah.
literal physical barricade.
But the blue light thing, again, I there's been multiple people that have, researchers, experts on like color psychology, other researchers on psychology, have spoken out on this and said, at best it might be something like blue light just looks really weird, and it might just like make people think like, oh, I don't want to be in this area, so they walk away. Or one person, speculated, well, blue has an association with the police, so maybe there's something to do with that. But like for example, you could put in like a strobe light at the end of the platform, and maybe that has an 84% decrease in suicides just because people don't want to look at a strobe light. Like, so, the color blue is not innately something that has been proven to cause this. It may be something loosely related, but we don't know for sure at this point. The research is absolutely still out. And, one of the things that I think that original study really like didn't get right is they didn't code for daylight versus nighttime. It seems like they didn't emphasize that too much. And obviously in the day, like the blue light is either going to be off or just not particularly visible. And most of the suicides, as far as I've been able to tell, take place during the day rather than at night. So there's a whole lot there that can be, done in a much better way, I think.
Yeah. Especially the gates just seem much better because it's not all suicide. Sometimes people trip. There can
Absolutely.
be
There's plenty of instances of people with visual impairments.
Yeah, I've seen elderly or people just with physical impairments fall into the tracks, and they have to like rush out and stop the trains to help get them out.
Yeah.
If you have a gate there, that problem also goes away. They're not going to somehow jump 3 meters in the air and over the gate.
Yeah. There's a plan to like have all of the major train stations, I think, and a lot of the major train lines have them all, platforms, but that's going to take decades, it seems. So
yeah, I have been seeing that progress though.
Yeah.
As mentioned, I lived in Osaka. When did I leave there? 7 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
But I still go there once or twice a year for visits. And stations that used to have nothing definitely have the gates installed now.
Yeah, I've seen that
That's
happen
me every
in the Kansai area too, like during my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So little by little.
Tokyo, I think it's even more so.
Probably, yeah.
Where I live here, there's none of them.
Yeah. Well, that's less of a problem, I would assume, anyway.
We actually just had a ticket gate installed in my local station
Oh man.
maybe 3 years ago now.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. You have to actually like put it in a machine now.
Yeah, so blue lights definitely still, the jury is out. But next time you see a blue light on a train station, you may know at least why it's there, even if it may not necessarily be doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Two things I found interesting I want to point out. First was that the way this article is written, it's hard to tell who did the experiment, but either Stephen Westlin or Nicholas Ciccone did a study with having people essentially put air into a virtual balloon by clicking a button, but if it popped, they would lose more they could have gotten.
Yeah.
And they found that blue light made people report feeling like more relaxed or more calm, but it had no effect on their actual behavior to do the experiment.
Yeah. I think they were looking specifically at impulsiveness, right?
Yeah. So their conclusion was even if people may self-report blue light to be more calming or peaceful, there's no evidence that it actually affects your behavior.
Yeah.
The second thing I wanted to point out before we move away from the topic, just because it comes up a lot as Japan being a country with a really high suicide rate, Japan is in the top 10 if you limit it only to like developed nations. they're number 7. I looked it up. They have 15.2 people per 100,000. But the USA, who I assume is where most of our listeners are, is number 9.
Yeah.
With 13.9.
It's not far off. Yeah.
So even though Japan is higher, it's not that much higher.
Yeah.
I just, from personal experience, a lot of my friends have the stereotype of Japanese people being suicide crazy, and it's a little more common here, but it's not common here.
Yeah. I think I can't remember ever happening at any of the places where I worked or any people that I know personally. And of course, that's a very small sample size, but, it is absolutely a thing there. And unfortunately, I think because of the whole train thing, it's a very public thing in a way.
Yes, it's always news when someone jumps in front of a bullet train or something.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that definitely adds to that impression that it's perhaps like a daily occurrence kind of thing. And maybe it is a daily occurrence, but it's like you said, there are other places that have, even more occurrences.
For example, Korea was the number 1 in the developed world with 24.6 per 100,000, which is...
That's,
like, I don't know, I guess a 90% increase. Not quite double, but getting close to it.
Yeah.
And that's only with... the developed wealthy nations. If you look at all nations, then Japan's number 30.
Oh, wow.
And the US is 34.
Wow. Yeah, so no, very interesting. Yeah, it's good to put things in perspective like that. All right, so let's move on to the next little thing that will teach us a little bit about why things happen certain ways in Japan in train stations.
Okay, that question is, what's the role of seken no me?
Seken no me. Okay, so literally...
I almost said seken no moe.
Seken no moe. No, we're not talking about moe today. But
it's still there on the trains.
So literally this means like the eye of the world or society. It's like the public gaze. Yeah, the public gaze, the public eye. So basically, it's almost like a societal pressure, like... that when you're in public, people are watching you and you want to put up a good front so that people don't think bad things about you, even though you have no idea who these people around you are.
I feel I want to point out it's not a uniquely Japanese
absolutely
thing.
Not.
I think it's like a cultural universal,
Yeah.
but the way it manifests in different cultures is different.
Yeah. And of course, Japan is particularly famous for being, a collective society and this and that. And there are always exceptions, but there is definitely this sort of idea. I've been with people and doing stupid stuff, like not anything illegal or anything, but doing something in public where I'm told like, no, they're watching you. Don't do that. Right. A Japanese person will tell me that. It's like, I don't know these people. I don't care about like what they think. And that's the American approach, of course. But, especially if you're from a small town in Japan or something, you're going to be particularly concerned about what people think of you.
I will say my personal understanding of this has changed a lot since I now live in a small town.
Absolutely.
Because in Osaka, you have anonymity where you can kind of do things and no one will ever know. Here, if I do anything, everyone in the whole town will know.
Yeah. So, it all comes down to, not embarrassing yourself, not embarrassing your family, and not like bothering people, right? And this is a big deal on, in Japanese trains and the train stations. So, of course, this kind of goes back to the whole escalator thing, right? Like one of the reasons why people want to stand on one side is so that they don't get in the way of the people that want to walk up the stairs. Or the escalator.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's this interesting dynamic between, like this whole, like, I don't want to be a bother, but you're actually kind of being a bother by being less efficient, right?
Yes.
So, but this happens a lot on trains, like if you're waiting for the train and you're not in those lines and those numbers that we talked about, people might give you like, a funny look and think like, oh, you're not following the rules. Right. And for an oblivious foreigner, they may not realize it, but for the average Japanese person, they'll definitely notice and, feel kind of guilty about it and get in line literally and figuratively. And then, of course, there's all that like train etiquette, like wearing your book bags and, stuff like that on the train, right? Like you try to wear your book bag on a crowded train, people are going to be looking at you kind of funny because you're getting in the way of people. You're like hitting people with your bags. You got to take that off. Right. That goes into all like train etiquette and all that stuff. But definitely, I think that is that whole like idea of being aware of, not bothering people and how your actions may be bothering people really influences how people behave in these public spaces. And helps keep moving things smoothly too.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I think those are some of the main points of like stuff that you may have noticed on Japanese train stations that may have made you wonder, like, why do they do that? But are there any other things, Ryan, that you can think of?
There's some things with, I guess, etiquette on trains that always, I guess the right word would be annoy. I'm trying not to say that
Yeah.
one. There seems to be somewhat of a lack of logic behind some of it.
I agree that some of them puzzle me too.
So there's also one that I'm convinced is because of a misunderstanding. So if you look at Japanese signs, they will often say to turn off your cell phones. And what I've had explained to me, so maybe this is wrong, is the reason for that is that there might be people with pacemakers or something.
I've heard that too, yes.
Yeah, and that the signal from the phone could interrupt. Like, one won't, but if there's like 30 people all around them with phones on, it could be, so you should turn them off. But it seems Japanese people instead interpreted that as don't talk on the phone because it's rude. So no one turns their phones off, but they will get very upset if you talk on the phone.
Yeah, and
however,
go ahead.
Like, you can talk to a human being next to you quite loudly, and they don't care.
Yeah. And of course, I'm no expert on pacemakers, but it seems like that's not a thing in other places in the world. And there's plenty of places where you're in very close contact and everybody has a phone these days. So does it really still do that? Maybe in older models, but who knows? I really don't know.
Again, I'm no expert. Yeah. I suspect it's similar to the turn off electronics during takeoff on an airplane where it doesn't do anything, but they thought it might do something. So
extra caution.
Extra cautious.
Yeah. Right.
In case you're very young, that used to be a rule that was undone.
Yeah.
I guess like 10 years ago now.
Yeah, turn off all electronics. Now it's just you got to, put it on plane mode. Oh, the other thing that I guess, on that note confuses me is the whole like putting on makeup on trains. So it's some people, they portray it as this like huge deal. It's super rude. Like I never really got that. Like I can understand if you have like a bunch of open bottles of like liquid makeup and the train stops and you have the risk of spilling it on the person next to you. Sure. But if you're just putting on like maybe a little bit of mascara and some foundation or something like that, like I don't see how that is rude. I get the impression that it has something to do with like, oh, we don't want to see you in this like private thing that you do. But it's like, what's the big deal? Like,
I'm in the same area. I could not care less.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't wear makeup, so I've never even really paid attention.
Yeah. I mean, if you have an open bottle nail polish, then yeah, I would be against that. But
I can say I think I've seen Japanese people, not even just like foreigners, breaking all of these rules.
Absolutely.
At some point,
Yeah.
The most interesting one I remember is I think my first year living in Osaka, one rule is usually don't eat on the train. Very small things are usually acceptable, but like nothing big. Like you can have like a bottle of water. I don't think they'll care.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, this like group of people got on the train with like an entire dinner wrapped up in like aluminum foil.
Oh my God.
And they just unwrapped it and like started having like an actual sit down meal, like in the corner of the train.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard horrible stories too of Japanese like drunk guys, and
Oh, I've seen that.
Yeah. Oh, those drunk people. Yeah.
Yeah, one guy got super drunk and like fell asleep leaning on my friend.
Oh boy.
Like not just a little bit, like actually laying on him. And when the train came to a stop, the momentum kind of pulled him upright.
Yeah.
So he was able to like sneak away when we got off at our stop. And then when the train started again, we were looking at the window and we saw him like fall off the seat or fall over.
Jeez.
Because there was no one to catch him when the momentum went back up again.
Yeah. No, I've seen like old like salaryman type guys, like they're collapsing and they're younger, like kohai, their juniors like have to catch them.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So public intoxication, that's pretty much okay.
I mean, I guess there's the whole Chikan thing too, if you want to go into
Oh my God, Chikan. Yeah, well, we don't have to go into that, but basically Chikan are like train gropers and that's a whole thing. And there's you often hear about that in the news and stuff. So not good. Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. Definitely don't do that. That is actually illegal.
Yes. Okay, I think, so hopefully you learned about why some of these kind of mysterious things happen in Japan on train stations. If you have any other observations, you can go ahead and ask us at ichimon@japankyo.com or send any of your other questions. We'd love to see what you're wondering about. That about does it. Anything else, Ryan?
I guess I'm good.
Yeah. All right then. So we'll see you next time, and make sure to come back and subscribe and rate and review wherever you get your podcast. Share it with your friends, and we'll be super appreciative and super thankful. Right, Ryan?
I know I will.
All right. See you next time.
See ya.